Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to my show, High Road to Humanity. In every episode, I tell you powerful true stories filled with great wisdom that you can use in your own life as you strive for a higher road to travel. My featured guests will have their own unique stories to tell that enlighten your mind and your soul. So kick back, relax, and learn the secret to success when you take the high road.
First touch, strong connection, it lays deep in your soul.
Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to High Road to Humanity. And I have a fabulous lady here today joining me from Wales, and Iona Jenkins is here. And Iona, welcome to High Road to Humanity.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm excited you're here. She's written this really cool book, To Sing with Bards and Angels. And this is right up my alley. I can hardly wait to talk to her about this. Let me give you a little information about Iona. She is an author. She is a creative writer. She's a poet. She has an MA in education from Brunel University, professional diplomas in person-centered counseling from Metanoia, yes, Institute in London. She's also a hypnotherapist. She began life as a French teacher in her home country of Yorkshire, which I think is super interesting. Then she became a clinical hypnotherapist, which is awesome, and she developed her own practice. Now, she moved to London, to the Vale of Glamorgan in Wales, brought Iona to more relaxed creative life. And she's traveled, you guys. She's traveled all over the place. She's written tons of poems. In this cool book, To Sing with Bards and Angels, she has poems, she has practices. But I guess what I want to know, Iona, is tell me your story. How did you start writing poems, and how did you connect with the angelic realm? I guess is what I'd like to know.
Well, I've been writing poems for a number of years now. I think it started in my 30s, and it started after quite a traumatic time.
Oh,
It started after the breakup of my first marriage. And I attended a spiritualist circle, and I sat in this circle with a group of people. And suddenly I found I was writing poetry. I found that I was wanting to go out into nature. When I was out in nature, I was writing poetry. I started, taking a notebook with me everywhere I went, and the poems just flowed, and I put them in folders and folders. And
my God.
eventually, it wasn't till I got past 60 that I did anything with them. Yeah, I was too busy working.
Right. Well,
At least that's my excuse.
Yeah. Well, was that when you first put your book together? Did you put a book together at that time then?
No, I just collected poetry. It was years later that I wrote a book.
Okay.
In fact, I didn't actually write a book until I came to Wales. I had 25 years in London where I worked in multi-ethnic societies, first of all, teaching French, and then I retrained from my MA, and it started with mentoring student teachers.
Right.
And I retrained, and I became a counselor and psychotherapist, and then a hypnotherapist.
Wow.
And during that time in London, I started going to the parks and gardens, because it's so built up, you actually need green space.
Right.
So I became members of various places, and I started spending free time in parks and gardens. Then the poems started to really flow. I started to get ideas from, for stories, and I started to get little bits of philosophy dropping into my head.
Mm-hmm.
And it just carried on and on. Then I found labyrinths to walk. I don't know if you're familiar with
Well,
those.
and yeah, let's talk about that, because you talk about it in your book, and I don't know if the audience know, and I looked it up and I did a little research myself. Labyrinths are paths. They're pathways. I also saw that they were from medieval times, from druid times.
Yes.
Yeah, and I also looked that there are labyrinth locations, and I looked to see, because there's a labyrinth society.
Yes.
And so talk about this. Educate us, because I know nothing about this.
Well, I had a booklet from someone in London at the Christian Spiritual Center. Now, I was practicing Buddhism at the time, not Christianity.
Right.
And at the Christian Spiritual Center, they were doing a one-day course on labyrinth walking. So I went along to see what it was about, because I was kind of intrigued by it.
Right.
Something had hit a note, and I'd become intrigued.
Yeah.
So I went along to this thing, and actually in the city of London, near all the banks and the financial institutions, they put a labyrinth in the pavement that you can actually walk, which is quite amazing. I walked this labyrinth. It was only a short walk from the spiritual center. And
Right.
after that, I started to find labyrinths all over the place. People had put them in churchyards. I found one in West London, at the back of a convent. And every fortnight, I'd go and knock on the door and ask the sisters if I could actually walk their labyrinth. And they'd always let me go into their garden, and I'd go and do that. Now, this was like a 7-circuit labyrinth. It's like a path to a center, and when you walk in it, it's like you walk into the center of yourself.
Oh my
So as you
gosh.
walk in it, it really slows you down. And there are various things you can do on a labyrinth. You can ask for answers to questions, you can ask for healing, you can ask for inspiration.
Is it
And
an
as you go,
energy? Is it an energy center?
it seems to be something to do with the sacred geometry, which is a spiral, which is something you find in nature everywhere. Spiders'
Okay.
webs, shells, you know, you can find that pattern everywhere. And it's something to do with the geometry. And you have this idea that you walk into the center of yourself. And then in the center of yourself, in the center of the labyrinth, you can spend time in meditation,
Wow.
sort of, waiting for answers. You may not get them, but then when it's time to walk out, sometimes they come on the way out.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't come, and sometimes they come a week later when you're standing in a supermarket checkout. It's quite amazing what can happen with it. And I found it was making me more and more creative. I was getting ideas for stories. The philosophy was flowing. I was walking the labyrinth in different seasons, actually taking notice of that season through my senses. My senses were developing. My
Mhm.
strongest sense is sight anyway. So
Okay.
the colors were more or less exploding. I was listening more carefully, although I did learn listening, hearing and listening are things that I'm feeling, are things I really developed as a counselor.
Wow.
In client-centeredness, you have to be empathic, you have to be with the client, and you're
Mhm.
listening on a lot of different levels.
Mhm.
But the labyrinth was increasing that along with the
Wow.
poetry.
That is
Um,
amazing.
Very creative for me. So I was obviously, my path was becoming creative rather than therapeutic.
Yes.
Although I found that my creative path can also help to heal. I've healed bits of myself, bits of my own psyche by writing. It's like
Mhm.
writing my way into being, if you like.
Yeah. No, I'm with
And it
you.
and it kind of connects to the ancient bards. Now, in West London, I don't know if you've heard of Kew Botanical Gardens. It's a place where they do conservation, that they take seeds from all over the world and grow things. And they're conserving those particular species for humanity.
Okay.
And it's an amazing place. And all the time I was in there, I got a membership, like a friendship, so I could go in whenever I want, because it's quite expensive. But if you have a membership,
Yeah.
it's a great thing.
Sure.
And so I would go into Kew Gardens and I would just sit there, meditate or walk. And all the time I was getting ideas as this was going on. And I got the idea that there was a druid talking to me. I don't know why. And druids, of course, are the ancient Celtic religion.
Mhm.
And I'd not thought about druids before until then. It was only when I came to Wales, which is a more Celtic place,
Yes.
that I decided to, look into that more fully.
I
And that's
love.
when I came up with the bards, the Celtic poets, the
Okay.
actors, the musicians, the people who passed on the ancestral stories. They
Through their
Yes,
poetry, through their
yes,
stories. Yes.
enchanting people, raising consciousness, opening doors. It was quite amazing. They were quite magical.
Neat.
And still today, modern bards obviously some play rock music and some do modern art. Some bards do crafting,
Sure.
making crafts out of wool. And some of us just write, and a voice develops, and my voice developed into a creative, lyrical style. And I thought, well, if this is my voice, and bards can actually open doors, enchant, and raise consciousness, why can't I write to do that? So I
Ah,
thought, I won't write an academic book.
okay.
I'll write something in flowing spirit. Now, the bards had this thing, this name for their inspiration, which is Awen,
Yes.
A-W-E-N.
Yes. And you
Yes,
talk about that. Go ahead.
yes.
Yes.
So I thought, well, why don't I just write in the Awen? Why make it academic? Then it's accessible to as many people as possible,
Mm-hmm.
for people to kind of look at this and think, wow, I don't have to be a great artist. Maybe, I paint little pictures. Maybe it's okay to do that. Maybe the few words I write on a piece of paper are fine. Maybe that can develop from that small space. And that's how this book, To Sing with Bards and Angels, is supposed to work. Now,
Right.
where did the angels come from?
Yes. When did you start talking? Because I communicate with angels, and she's
Yes,
always my guardian angel's right here. Now you say you can see. Can you see him?
I can see them in my third eye, if you like, in my
So do you
forehead.
see my angels next to me? She's gonna look.
I I can see an energy around you.
Okay.
Yes,
It's interesting. I just wanted to ask. Now, for the people on the podcast, I'm asking her if she can,
yeah,
because my guardian angel stands right here.
yes.
She's right
It
here.
it's like a feeling of energy around you. And it's how, when you link into somebody, you think that person's all right because of what you feel.
Right.
When you develop your senses, you can
Right.
link into that and think that person's safe for me.
Right.
And I would look at you and think you're safe for me. There's
Right.
a guardian energy, a nice energy.
Right. Now I'm an empath, so I can feel it. Like I can feel your energy if I tap in, but I can't see it. I always
No.
think it's cool when people can see auras. I can feel and I know. I have
Mhm.
claircognizance or clairsentience where I just know. Sometimes,
Yes.
and I want to know about this with you. Sometimes I don't want to know. Have you
Sometimes it's best not to.
have you and this is what I've run across. I mean, we might as well talk about it. There are times where I I I'm so psychic because I'm tuned into God, tuned into the divine. So somebody will say something and I'll just blurt it out. And then I'm like, oh,
Yes.
but it's quick, it comes quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find yourself doing that too?
Yeah. It's like something drops into your head and you say it or you
Yeah.
write it and you think, well,
Oh,
where did I get that from?
I know. I know.
And it's a strange thing in that I met this. If I go back to the Bards and Angels for a minute,
Yeah, let's do it.
I was in Rome. I used to have some Italian neighbours and they invited us over. And we were in Lazio, and I'd spent the day in Rome, and I'd been in the Sistine Chapel, and I'd been looking at Michelangelo's art, and I'd
Yes.
been wowed by the statue in St. Peter's of La Pieta,
Yes.
cradling the dead Christ, and how accurate the muscles and sinews were.
Yeah.
And it was just so amazing. And it was like I was picking up the feeling of this nurturing mother looking after the dead child, and it was a feeling of sacred feminine, almost, of being nourished and looked after, and the feeling that that the angels belonged to her.
Mhm.
um and after I'd been doing that, I went back to Lazio and I walked outside with my notebook and I sat on a seat. It was late afternoon and the sun was shining, and the trees that in gardens were covered in ripened lemons. The scent was unbelievable, and the beautiful colours. And I sat down and the earth looked kind of red where I was sitting, and there were mountains rising in the background.
Mm.
And suddenly the whole thing seemed to mingle, like the angels from the art itself, the statues, and the nature that I was sitting in, the whole thing seemed to mingle together, to like an interplay. And I thought, language of angels. Suddenly,
Mhm.
this is a language of angels. It's an inspiration, and I started to write a poem. And I wrote a poem called "The Language of Angels," filed it like I usually do, and then years later we moved here. This I was living in London then. Years later we moved here, and then one night there's a full moon outside, and I live in a small flat on the
Yeah.
edge of a cliff with a
Right.
balcony that overlooks the water, the sea,
Mhm.
in all weathers. And I could hear the sound of the waves. It was February. It was winter. There was a full moon on the water. It was full silver. It was absolutely gorgeous. And I was like sitting in meditation, and I got this picture of a being in my mind's eye, kind of tall, very serene, pearly white with edged in beautiful pale colours, like a shimmer from the moonlight. And I called it an angel because that's come to me culturally. That's what I know. That came from my Catholic background,
Right.
and 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 coupled with what I'd seen in the Vatican, which had
Ah.
nothing to do with the priests. It was more to do with the art. It was the whole thing seemed to make sense. It was like, but this is an angel. I'm looking at an angel. This angel can tell me things. So I thought, well, why don't I write down the thoughts I'm having? And then the thoughts started to turn into a conversation.
Right.
Like, I'd think of a thing to say, and then an answer would come into my head,
Yes.
and then I keep doing that.
Yeah.
And I never got the angel's name for quite a while. I don't think I'd say the angel's name round about chapter 17 or 16 of this book.
Yeah, you
Um,
don't. And tell the audience
yeah.
what you say it's a man. You call it a
Um,
man.
it doesn't.
It feels like
It
a
isn't.
male energy.
It seems to be, but
Mhm.
then sometimes it appears to be very feminine because it actually seems to work through the moon, through the
Ah,
moonlight. So it connects to what we call the moon goddess, if you like. There's
okay.
a femininity about it. It's soft. It's
Right.
never harsh.
Right.
Um, the wisdom is gentle. It's always beautiful. It never judges.
Right.
She never judges. Yes,
Mhm.
I'd say it was male because I'm female. I guess if I was male, it might appear female.
Right. Well, I
Yeah.
wrote down, you say, and I think this is what the angel says. You were talking about, it's Oran Moore in Gaelic and the
Yes.
great song. And it says, I wrote down, when the mind and heart come together, the language of angels is easy to translate. Then you will create love.
Yes. That's what he said.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, more than anything, I think the angels bring in for me, what I've learned more than anything, and I want to know what you feel is love.
Yeah. And I think that's the main thing that there is.
Hmm.
The Buddha said, with our thoughts we create the world, and I think that's probably quite true.
I agree.
But if we introduce our minds to our hearts, then maybe we would create with love. We wouldn't
Yes.
create the world from our stupidity. We'd create it
Right, from
from a
here.
loving place.
Yes.
But maybe we have to clear bits of shadow on our quest to do that.
Yes. Yes.
It's like a quest for the Holy Grail, if you like. You're looking for this cup of love, which is somewhere in the heart. And
It's
on the
in,
way, you meet all these little challenges on the path, which can last your whole lifetime. But you're
yes.
meeting these challenges and not saying, oh, right, I don't want that part of myself. It's rubbish. I don't want to be like that. You know, um, to actually say, okay, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to find out about you. Because sometimes these dragons are guarding really, really brilliant treasures. Like if we never felt fear,
Right.
we would never know we were in danger. If we never felt anger, we would never know when our boundaries were being broken. It's just that not to act it out and go around destroying, to think, well, how can I use this to create a decent boundary that doesn't hurt anybody?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
just want to know your feeling on this. I am, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the war in Ukraine, and I'm thinking about
Uh-huh.
all the anger that's gone on in the world. And what I feel, and not to sound Pollyanna by any way, I just feel like, personally, and from talking to other people like yourself, the more you connect with God, the more joyful you become. And when you're
Mhm.
connected, and you can say God, you can say divine, you can say
Yes.
whatever you want, source,
Yes.
I don't care what you call it. But
Yes.
these people are destroying because they're empty on the inside. And what
Mhm.
happens in my mind is that energy fills you up so you're not so empty.
Exactly. I would agree wholeheartedly with that. And, sometimes I feel compassion when I think about what is happening here,
Right,
because it is so sad
right.
that people are not connecting. For somebody, you look at somebody who's creating a massive problem in the world, and you think, well, that person doesn't go out and see the sunrise. That person doesn't see angels in the moonlight.
No.
That person cannot connect to the earth, the sea, and the sky. That must be a terrible existence, you know, even
How
though that person may be
horrible.
deluded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's true. No, that's absolutely true. And I think the more of us, and they talk about the Great Awakening, and I want to kind of know your thoughts on it. I feel like personally, the more of us that talk about it and that raise our vibration, we help to
Mhm.
raise other people's. What's your feeling? What's going on over there in Wales? What's it like? Do they talk about these things like you and I are discussing?
Um, it depends who you're mixing with. There are various places here, like we've got a Buddhist center.
Hmm.
We've got various Christian associations. I think there's a Theosophical Society somewhere. Um,
But
there's
do you
also
see?
rugby,
Yeah, but do you see that?
which
But do
is
you
a bit
see?
rough.
Yes, there you go. But do you see the average person like starting to wake up and pay attention to this kind of stuff? I guess is my question more than anything.
Yeah, I do actually, because I belong to a writer's circle. Now, my writer's circle are really nice people, and I've known them a long time. And we read our stuff to each other. Now, my stuff in the beginning was a bit of a shock, but the
Ah,
more my voice developed, the more people became accepting of it, because it was authentically me. We're all authors, so for me to be somebody else would have been impossible. They started to see that this was authentic for me, and that was my descriptive voice, and people started to love the description and the lyrical description. And one person said how soothing she thought it was
would
when
you
she
like
was
to
reading
read?
it.
Yeah, would you like to read one of your poems for us today? Something
Yes,
that you would? Yes, I'd
would you
love to.
like the language of angels?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
But the prose itself, I'll go on, I'll read you a couple of little bits.
Okay.
I'll start with the language of angels because that's where it started.
Okay.
There is peace in the dove grey mountains, and in this rich red Roman earth, as late October sunshine wraps my skin in its subtle scent of ripened lemons. The leaves turn slow from green to gold. I see my inspiration like a lighted lamp. And then my mind, becoming still at last, is more than just a little glad to be here in Italy, such a warm, embracing place where my own creative truth outruns the waves of restless, racing thoughts, and the sound of my heart's voice rises, speaking soft in the language of angels.
Beautiful. Wow.
Uh,
That's beautiful.
I'll
Is there?
read you a little bit of prose.
Okay, sure.
Okay. The full moon is going to keep me awake, so I decide to stay up for an hour or so. I light a candle lantern in the doorway, where my balcony looks out over the darkened sea. Next, I drape a blanket around my shoulders to stay warm, with both door and heart open to the still night air, the lilting music from the harp of the ocean, and the bliss of being able to float upon the notes of the great song, which in Gaelic is known as Or and Mor. These words, expressing the idea of a creative spirit, do in fact suggest to me a greater musicality than their English translation. Every time I think about them, a deep sense of connection to a living, breathing universe wells up, enfolding me in its vast musical cloak of wonder and magic.
That was beautiful, Iona. Wow. You know, when I saw your name, I don't know if anybody's ever, people probably say this to you all the time. When I went to Scotland, I bought this cross that I
Oh,
wear.
wow.
I've worn it for many years, and I bought
Yes.
it on the island of Iona.
Wow, it's an Iona cross.
Yes, ma'am. And I went there. I was going through a weird point in my life, and I'll tell people there are these Celtic crosses that are standing on the shores, and they're gigantic, and they've all been, I don't know how it's carved out in the Celtic. Yeah, in the Celtic. But bottom line is, I want to know what you know. I'm sure you've been to the island. It was an island that was first, some of the first Christians, they say, were there in Scotland.
That's right. It was St. Cuthbert.
Mm-hmm.
And his parents were druids, and he came from Ireland. And he went to live on Iona. And he did quite a lot of peacemaking, as well as walking around healing people. And they say that he slept upon that his pillow was made of stone.
Oh my
It was a natural stone. And there's a little chapel there to him in the abbey, and it's very, very beautiful. Iona is where it's like I felt myself on Iona. It was like I really found myself, and that's why I'm called Iona.
Okay. All right. I thought so.
It was like the island said, it was like I felt the island called me by its name.
I know. Hold on a minute. I have to show you something. Hold on. So I bought this. I've had this for, I don't even tell you how many years. This is from the island of Iona.
Ah, wow. Yes. A horseshoe.
Oh my gosh.
Horseshoe. Wow.
Yes. I got, isn't that crazy? And Iona has, and it's funny, when I saw your name, it brought back so many memories, because it's probably been 20 years, but that place had a magic about it.
It's something. It's an incredibly special place. It's like there's a thinning of the veil there. It's almost like the other world and the everyday world meet.
Yes,
it's quite amazing. And I watching a sunset on Iona, I got this definite impression. It was almost like a deep voice saying to me inside, "You can heal with words."
Because you can.
And I became a hypnotherapist after that. I did a course in hypnotherapy to go with my counseling and psychotherapy, and it that went on for ages. And I guess maybe bards, when they're actually enchanting people, it's a form of hypnosis, I suppose.
Sure.
But it works. It opens the door, like hypnosis help people to change. Especially, I worked a lot with anxiety.
Oh my gosh. And I bet you helped a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah. And working with people without confidence, and even working with some very successful people who were frightened of public speaking.
Yeah. That's true.
It was quite amazing.
Well, there's a couple other things. We've got more time. I want to ask you about this book. Is really, really awesome, you guys. I just want to mention again the name. It's To Sing with Bards and Angels, and it's by Iona Jenkins. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about trees.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I will. I just moved, and I was in New Mexico for so long. I just moved to Arizona. I saw you spent some time in Arizona.
I did.
I'm up here in Payson. You probably know where I'm at. I'm not too far from Sedona. I moved up here because of the trees. And people are like, "Why did you go here?" And I'm like, "I wanted to be by the trees." And people will laugh at you, but you talk about the trees, you talk about the redwoods in your book, you talk about the strength, the stability, the grounding, and then you say trees have a strong connection to the earth through their root networks and to the sky through their branches. And there's a connection. I feel a really strong connection to the trees, and I wanted to know I wanted to hear your feeling about it.
Yeah, it's if I don't feel grounded, if I feel like my energy is not too stable, I would go out for a walk and lean on a tree. Now, it's not exactly tree hugging, but I have favorite trees around here, in the parks in this little town. And I'd go and lean on a tree. And you can ask the tree a question, like you can ask your angel, and maybe it's the angel talking, and maybe it's the tree. But
Right.
leaning on the tree and actually touching the bark and saying, I've got problems with this. Can you help me? And they always do.
I
And
agree.
and when I leave, you know how the shamans used to leave tobacco. Well,
Yes.
I don't like the smell or the feel of it, so I leave little dried rosebuds.
Oh, that's beautiful. No, that's beautiful, because that's what I do. I'll like look for some tobacco or keep some so I can give it,
Yeah,
back to the
yeah,
land. But I never thought about that, to give
yeah,
rosebuds back.
yeah.
My feeling is this is just I feel like the trees have, been here forever. They're here before us, they're
Mm,
here after us. They have so
yes,
much knowledge, so much
yes.
wisdom. Um, I feel like the energy of the trees, I feel like I needed the energy of the trees. I wanted to be close to the trees. And
Mm,
there's
mm,
something that draws you close, like you talk about nature.
that's right.
There's something when you become really spiritual, then you start to realize the connection.
And of course, in Druidry, trees are very sacred,
Maybe I was a
and
druid too, huh?
you might have been. But there was a connection with when I was in Arizona. I definitely felt the connection between Native American and Celtic Druidry. There's definitely a connection. Looking
Oh,
at
did
Cathedral
you?
Rock, I could
Okay.
see Celtic knotwork, and it was almost like it was reflecting
Oh,
my own culture back to me, but sort of saying, like, thousands of miles away, we're all connected in like the flowing
interesting.
patterns of the Celtic knotwork you've got on the cross there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. Um, but trees, definitely.
Well,
And
let's talk about the Celtic knot there for a minute. Because as you're talking, I'm thinking the knots were put, they all have meaning. And I'm just wondering, when you say connection, and I'm thinking of the knots, was that their way of, wasn't that their way of their clans connecting? I don't know. Why am I feeling there's like some kind of connection there between the Celtic knots and connecting with, do you know what I mean?
yes,
I don't
I,
know.
I can't actually explain that to you. It's just that the Celtic knots, it's like continuous flow.
Is
And
that what it is? Okay.
when you're standing in trees, you will probably feel a continuous flow, and
Flow.
you might feel that there's a connection between the two things, but also the connection between druids and trees. Now, the other day, um, a very sacred tree, one of the most sacred tree is the oak, I suppose, but another one is an apple tree, which is connected to longevity and health. And one day I was sitting there and I'd been reading and I had this image of an apple tree right in my face, covered in apples. And I remembered that when I was working, I used to have an apple for lunch every day. And
Oh,
because there was that old saying of an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
I think it
And
does.
well, I haven't had, touch wood, a lot of illness in my life.
Right.
And when I gave up work, I stopped having the apple a day and my cholesterol went up. And so I'm getting this apple tree. So I think, well, I'll, I'll eat the apples again. I'll go and get that apple a day again. And having done that, I went out for a walk and it was, late September. And I'm walking down the little back roads in this small town I live in. And suddenly I'd never noticed them before, but the apple trees, there were apples hanging over walls. It was quite incredible. It was like I'd got the
Oh
apple
my
tree
God.
inside and there it was outside.
Right. You created it.
Yeah, it was like there was a
Yeah.
connection, I hadn't
Yeah.
found it inside to get it outside again and start
Yeah.
eating the apples.
Yeah. I think it's a manifestation too, because whatever comes to mind when you're that in touch, then
Yeah.
you're immediately drawn. That's what
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
from that. I want
Yes.
to know what you think. You wrote so many cool things in your book. Um, you talk about ravens, and
Right. Yeah.
the other day I had like 5 of them in my yard, and I'm like, this is crazy.
Really?
Yeah. And
Wow.
so I'm like looking up ravens, trying to figure out, all about them. But you talk about them, and you also talking about establishing relationship with pets, which I think is so important. So do you want to kind of address, would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't have a pet because I live in an apartment. We're not allowed to have them, but I have
Uh,
had them in the past. Um, and I connect to animal spirits quite easily, and dogs like me. And I remember doing a meditation in Kew Gardens once, and when I came out of the meditation, there was a peahen near my feet.
oh my goodness.
It was sleeping near my feet, and it wasn't there when I went into the meditation.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it's like
They're drawn.
the animal spirits come to me, and I like it.
Yeah.
Um, and connecting to pets is one way of actually activating that.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
You
Fantastic.
start to feel the soul of the pet. Then
Right.
maybe the wild things come.
Right. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about. You talk a lot about the Arthurian magic. You talk about Avalon. You talk about Avalon Mystery School. I was just curious. I wonder if you share some of that information with the audience, if you can. I thought that was fascinating.
Well, Avalon was kind of, in Arthurian legend, Avalon, also known as the Isle of Apples, um, and Somerset, where that is famous for making for apple orchards and cider.
Aha.
And so the Isle of Avalon was where the 9 priestesses to the goddess were, and there was kind of the 2 legends have got mixed up really. Christ and the 12 disciples, and King Arthur and the 12 knights, and both of those exist in a place called Glastonbury in Somerset. Now,
Okay.
Glastonbury is a kind of very new agey town, where you can buy all sorts of gifts, and people dress in crazy clothes, and they do goddess ceremonies in the streets, and everybody's lovely though, everybody says hello to you.
Right.
And then there's a place called Chalice Well, which I connect to very strongly, and a place called Glastonbury Tor, which has a tower on the top, which
Okay.
is like the Chalice Well is like the feminine, the Tor is like the masculine. And
Okay.
I always think that when I've had enough of Glastonbury High Street with all the shops and all the people, I'm going to Avalon now because I've got a membership of Chalice Well. So I'll go off to Chalice Well, which has this ethos. Everybody's welcome in Chalice Well. It's not for any one religion. Its ethos is many paths, one
Okay.
source.
Okay.
So if I go there, I'm going to be in Avalon. And I find that is a sanctuary. It's a fantastic place of peace. It's a place in the other world. It's a place that exists in the heart. If you find it inside, then maybe it manifests outside. And if we could all
Right.
find our own Avalon, we could manifest a lovely world.
Wow. That's beautiful. I think that's how we're going to end it today, Iona. What do you think?
Yeah,
That's
that seems
beautiful.
like a good note
That's
to end
beautiful.
on.
It's beautiful. You guys, how do people get in touch with you if they want to? Do you have any kind of website? I think you do. Is your
I
name, isn't
do.
it? IonaJenkins.com.
It's ionajenkins.com. The book's called To Sing with Bards and Angels,
Yes.
and it can be bought from, in the States, Barnes and Noble, of course. Most bookshops, I suppose, you can order it from. It can be bought from my publisher, which is johnhuntpublishing.com,
Yes.
or it can be bought on Amazon.
Yes.
I'm also on Facebook. So
Oh,
if anybody wants to make Facebook friends with me, then I'd be happy to talk on Messenger.
and that's under Iona Jenkins as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Iona,
Yeah.
you have been just a joy. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. I've enjoyed talking to you a lot.
Yeah, me too. It's been really fun. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, you guys, we're going to get out of here for today. I want you guys to have a fabulous week. If you need an angel reading, go to my website, nancyyearout.com, and book your date and time. I hope everybody has a fabulous week. This is High Road to Humanity. Everyone take care and God bless.